Welcome to our 4th annual Mobile Development Day in the Research Park. Today we're excited to have 42 speakers and more than 250 people registered to attend today. So I think it's going to be a great discussion. We hope all of you have a chance to talk with each other, even if you're not on a panel or a moderator. Feel free to share your expertise throughout the day and hope it's an open dialogue. I'd like to start not only by thanking our speakers, all the moderators, and all the participants for being here, but I'd also like to thank our staff. Staff put a lot of work into making today possible. Special thank you to Laura Blyle and to Dana Cohen for all their heroic efforts to make this happen in a fairly short amount of time, year after year. And I'd like to do a quick recap of today's schedule. We're going to have 5 breakout sessions today. So this morning we start in this room. We'll have our keynote address by Julian Sanchez from John Deere. Then we'll go into breakout sessions in 2 rooms, the Lincoln and Alma Mater room. Then we'll be back here for lunch. And then we'll have 3 breakout sessions in the afternoon. We also have another room that's noted on your program that is reserved, the quad room, just for open networking. So feel free to use that room if you'd like to have a sidebar chat with somebody that you've met that you think you could learn something from, or if you weren't able to attend their panel session. Sharing this event is something that we hope you do throughout the day. So we have a hashtag for you. If you are so inclined to tweet, please use hashtag #RPMobileDay throughout the day to talk about the highlights you might experience. At UI Research Park is our Twitter handle, so if you're going to give us a little shout out, you might use that. And I'd also like to acknowledge that after this event, there are a variety of ways that you might share this content with your colleagues or others that are interested. We will be filming the keynote addresses, as you'll note the cameras in this room, and those will be available on our YouTube channel and will also be on the website following this event. The panel discussions will not be videotaped, so for those, we will have note takers in the room. We did this for Big Data Summit, and we thought it was helpful to have the notes, our bit of cliff notes, or as it used to be on campus, notes and quotes that you could take away from a class. We'll try to do something like that today, and so we'll do our best to capture some of the main topics that were discussed in each of the sessions in case you missed some of those. And those will also be emailed to you after the event. So as we tried to shape today's program, we wanted to think about what was hot for mobile in 2015. When we did this program 4 years ago for the first time, it was just an emerging conversation about everybody discussing something with mobile. Well, now that's starting to shift. I would say it's less about startup apps that are the first app to go into the store that are going to have a new game or something like that, and a lot more practical, the types of discussions that we're having. So some things that you might see in discussions online, such as this one that Mashable produced about top 2015 trends, would say things that are cutting edge, whether that's Internet of Things or wearables. There's also something else that's been emerging, which is a lot more about the business-to-business activities and how enterprises are adapting and including mobility in their solutions as well. We see companies looking at a few different ways. How do they reach their customers from an e-commerce platform online so that they can sell using mobile devices? How do they do mobile-first delivery for internal applications or improve efficiency in processes? So as you listen to the companies here today, I think you're going to hear that as a theme throughout, that it isn't necessarily just creating a new startup, but how can we improve the way that we deliver communication to our customers and processes to our distributors or suppliers or others using mobility as a solution. ComScore reports that 60% of all time spent with digital media is now via smartphones or tablets. So this has become a new reality that I think we all embrace, not just as an add-on, but really a way that changes the way we do business. We're here in the Research Park, here at the iHotel. We're on the side of the Research Park that's continuing to grow as we add additional development. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Research Park before we get started. We have a mix of activities that are reflected in today's program. The large corporations that are here, many of them with innovation centers, the startup companies that are here, and a whole lot of students that work here. All together, we make a really vibrant tech community that we're quite proud to have here in Champaign-Urbana. The corporate partnerships that are here have been instrumental in our success, and we thank them for making it possible. We have now 17 different corporations represented here in the park, large industry, most of these being Fortune 500 companies, and many of them that will be speaking today. Of these large corporations, 9 of them are Illinois corporations, Fortune 500 Illinois corporations. So I think that we really reflect a lot of the diversity of the state of Illinois and important industries that this state represents. And we continue to open new ones. We just announced the new AbbVie Innovation Center, and they'll be speaking more about that intersection of healthcare and IT today as well. And we are also very proud in the last couple of months to see the opening of the Yahoo building with nearly doubling in size of their workforce here, showing the importance of this operation not just for Illinois corporations, but for many leading companies in the software space around the country. We also have a very strong entrepreneurial support system here in the Research Park. Some of our startups will be talking, including our lunch speaker, who's a reflection of where they go beyond incubation. Our incubator facility has 47 startup companies and many different entrepreneurial support systems to help them get started. In addition to the 47 that are resident, we're meeting with somewhere around 200 or so a year now to provide support, whether they're students, staff, or faculty from the university. And this has resulted in our companies raising now $68 million in SBIR funding, $772 million in venture capital funding, and numerous multi-million-dollar acquisitions and exits as the end goal. Our students are instrumental. Many of them have done such impressive things that we continue to be surprised of what they can deliver for large and small companies and as entrepreneurs themselves, and some of them will share those experiences with you today. We even have a student who's in high school who I think will knock your socks off. So it's possible to get amazing results from students, and I hope that you'll see that reflected in their remarks today. All of this comes together as one technology community. We try to provide a location that has discussions like the ones we're having today, but also a place that spurs new ideas that help you be more creative and drive new innovation for your products and capabilities in your company. So thank you for being a part of today's discussion. It's my pleasure to welcome you here, and next to welcome our introductory speaker for our keynote address today, somebody that I've had the good fortune to get to know over the last year as he's led the John Deere Technology Innovation Center here in the Research Park, which continues to grow. Julian Sanchez joined in that position, but he had been at John Deere leading many of their mobility and user experience projects, and has also had prior experience in the medical device sector and in the defense sector. He has a PhD from Georgia Tech in human factors and psychology, which I think will come out in some of his remarks, as this is not just about whether it technically works, but the form and function also has a lot to do with the user experience. So please join me in a round of applause for Julian as we welcome him in his initial remarks.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Laura. All right, so everybody hear me okay? And I'm pretty short, so can everybody see me okay? All right. So they say that in order to be able to be effective in making future predictions, one of the things you have to do is look back at least 20 years. And so anytime you look back 20 years, you see enough trends and you get enough data to be able to have an intelligent conversation about the next 5 years, okay? So I'm actually gonna take us back 32 years, and we're gonna go back to the year 1983, right? So great year for movies. Return of the Jedi is out, and of course one of my favorite, Flashdance, is a Netflix favorite of mine. You had technologies like the Casio watch calculator, but perhaps most important in 1983 is the Motorola Dynatac phone that come out. And you know, we can all maybe remember Zach Morris talking on that beast. You know, $4,000 and only 30 minutes of talk time, right? Now, one of the interesting things, if you look at this timeline here, from 83 to really the mid 90s, is we all in this room understand now how fast, and we like to talk about how fast mobile technology moves. But really, for at least a greater part of a decade there, it really wasn't moving very fast. Certainly there were some advancements, but it was kind of a niche space, niche industry for at least 10 years, if not more, right? In fact, if you look at the IBM Simon, phone that came out in 1994, also featured in the movie The Net with Sandra Bullock. Not her best work. But they did make a sequel to The Net, which also highlights how terrible the 90s were for movies. But anyway, so if you think about this, this really was the first smartphone. I mean, if you think about it, in 1994, you could have a phone with a touchscreen that you could send an email with, right? I don't think I had an email address in 1994. Right? And of course, this phone flopped, right? I think the numbers on it is it only sold like right over 1,000 units. I actually did a little bit of looking around. I think my wife would kill me, but I almost bought one. It's $3,000. It still works on eBay, right? And so if you really want to go tech retro, that would be the way to do it with the IBM Simon. You know, think about this phone. If they would have re-released it 10 years later, it actually would have probably had a better chance of success than it did in 94, right? Think about 2004. I mean, we were playing around with the Razor. This phone was still a superior technology in 2004. So in any case, interesting perspective there that, you know, even in this industry, there was a time in which you got punished for going too fast, right? So fast forward to the late 90s, and so you got your Nokia 3210. If you're over the age of 30, you probably had one of these or one of its descendants, and you became quite skilled at the game of Snake. It was a disruptive phone, not because of Snake, although I actually did sort of stick with this brand at one point because of Snake, so a feeble mind, if you will. But you know, the price point was really the disruption here. It was the first time that, you know, they brought the cost down enough that people really started to be able to afford a phone. And the form factor, right? They all of a sudden became something that you could put in your pocket, and it wasn't the Zach Morris brick. Okay? So fast forward to early 2000, and that's when we had our first example of the camera on a phone. Right? Now, if you were in college in the 90s and you were in engineering or IT or computer science and you owned a digital camera and you owned a phone, you know, you have to admit that at least one evening you tried to duct tape the two together, right? Because you thought, yeah, this is the next big thing, right? So somebody was watching and eventually they decided, yeah, okay, we had to put one of these cameras on a phone. But we all know that, you know, for a long time, basically, it was nice to have these cameras and you took pictures, but you really couldn't do anything with the picture. You just took this low quality picture and then you would show it to someone and it was sort of this like letdown moment because you're showing them this bad quality picture on a bad quality screen, right? So the interesting thing about the camera phone though, or the cameras on phones is truly disruptive because it wasn't just basically the capability on the phones, but what it actually forced, I believe, was a whole new economy to say, like, what can we do with these pictures, right? If you think about that, the camera phone is really what I think has really greatly fueled social media today, right? And the fact that now people want to take pictures all the time because they have something that they can do with those pictures. They're not just taking them and holding on to them. Right? It also really, I mean, if you think about just disrupting human behavior and disrupting society, right? Look at these numbers and just kind of process what these numbers mean, right? So, you know, if you think about the Mount Rushmore of mobile innovations, I think cameras on the phone really is one of those that belongs up there and continues to be a key element of mobility. All right, so now we get into the early 2000s, and that's where we begin to see really the real smartphones start to come about. I know that we don't think of BlackBerry as a smartphone officially, but it really is smart enough. And several other things emerge, right? The Razor is really kind of an interesting use case, because if you think about it, before the Razor, these things were kind of ugly, right? And the Razor was kind of the first phone that said, hey, you know what? This is a consumer electronic and looks matter, right? And from then on, if you really think about all the phones that have come after that, they've all tried to look different or be unique in a form factor, right? Not that they were trying to look like the Razor, but they all the Razor just raised awareness that this was an important element of mobility. So, you know, there's our friend Zoolander with his mini phone. Okay. So now we're in mid-2000s, and you know, it's where basically computing power continues to go up, and you know, everybody decides, all right, well, you know, we've got enough of an infrastructure to support the idea of smart mobility, and so the battle is going to be about features in these phones, embedded features. Right? So you start seeing basically these, you know, this push toward these mini super little boxes of features, right? And the best example of that, this is another phone that I'd love to get on eBay someday too, is that Nokia N95, right? The amount of embedded features this phone has is still superior to any other mobile phone that exists today. I mean, FM radio, right? I mean, they were just going bananas with it. Everything, they wanted to put everything into these phones, okay? So that was in April of 2007. A few months later came the iPhone, right? And then they basically sort of reset the battle that was going to be waged. Now, Apple's interesting in that they're able to almost reset their own battles very quickly, right? So for a little while, the battle was, well, it's going to be the battle of easy, right? One of the things I always say about Apple is that it's not necessarily that it's easier, it's that it's easy and different, right? So it's really no easier to press a button to go to the next page than to swipe, right? But when you're swiping to the next page, it's easy and you're like, wow, I can't believe that I'm doing this. And so that's essentially what they were able to do to disrupt right there, is they said, you know, just like they had done with the iPod, right? You're able to turn up the volume by doing this. I mean, not that much easier than pressing up and down, but they basically leveraged that same model, right? Now, the interesting thing here, I'm going to go back one slide, is that if you think about a lot of these phones, the Razor, where you know, there's a form factor that matters. I mean, if you think about the way Steve Jobs was, you know he was paying attention to all this stuff, right? And one great phone in there that I just failed to mention is the Motorola Roker, right? So here was this phone where Apple went to them and said, hey, would you be willing to put our iTunes operating system on it and release it? And Motorola got all excited and said, oh man, this is going to be the partnership of the century here. Well, it's 2005, you know the iPhone was being developed, right? So all they were doing was basically what I call a business experiment. Let's just try out our platform, see how it works, and work through all the bugs on their phone, right? And they did, actually. And I'm going to kind of highlight the importance of being willing to do business experiments in this space, right? All right, so then comes the iPhone. Now, you know, just kind of fast forward, really for the last 5-6 years, the battle's been, the battle of the platforms and the battle of the app stores, right? And we kind of know who's, you know, what are the two leading horses in that race. So, you know, that battle wages on. Obviously, the app store is, I would say, with the camera on the phone, are the two disruptive innovations that, to me, are so far on the Mount Rushmore of mobility, because all of a sudden the conversation wasn't about embedded features. It was about, let's just put a few capabilities out there and have the world develop the features for our platform, right? So really kind of changed the game, and like I said, that battle goes on. Other battles being waged, I actually kind of get a kick out of the whole size thing, right? For a while we were kind of in the Zoolander model of like, we want the tiny little phones. Now we're going to the large screens again, for a good reason, right? People want a lot of surface screen. But I think wearables are actually going to sort of disrupt that battle again, because as wearables take off, we'll have additional screens and functionality on us, and maybe we'll get back to the point where the phone is essentially just kind of more of a hub for data, as opposed to something we want to carry around like it was a VCR, okay? VCR is a thing you watch movies with, for those of you. So the next battle then, I mean, I think this is really where, when you think of yourselves as a community of mobile engineers, developers, designers, this is where the next key battle will be waged, and it's the battle of the ecosystems, right? And what I mean by that is ecosystems like your automobile, right? So all of these companies, right, the Apples, the Androids, the Windows, they're in it now to try to service all of these individual ecosystems, right? And it's going to be fascinating because it's the first time in this 30-year history that really these companies have to make an effort to work with the folks that are already servicing those ecosystems, right? It's not just about doing innovation within their platforms, but it's about enabling those that are already there to do their things well and work together, right? So again, as a community, whether you work for a large corporation or whether you want to do a startup, I think that's where you're going to see the Apples and the Googles place a lot of investment in the next few years. Is how do you enable that whole ecosystem? And really the essence of it is user experience. How do you enable a connected experience within these ecosystems? Okay? So automotive is probably the leading example of where that battle's being waged, simply because you know, they go where the money is. The more cars, there are a lot of cars, so there's a lot of money to be made there. So we're kind of seeing it play out right now with Siri eyes and announcements about Android integration into some of the OEMs. I think the healthcare industry will be a really fascinating one to watch. This has always been kind of the healthcare is always kind of the holy grail for, you know, everyone that wants to fix the planet with technology. They think, well, that's the biggest opportunity for efficiencies, right? But it's almost like you have to cross, you know, the Siberian tundra before you get there, and nobody seems to make it out to the other end, right? So certainly there's impact already kind of on an individual basis of solutions for personal health. But will any one of these platforms be actually able to crack the healthcare ecosystem? And I'm talking about that connected experience in hospitals, in surgery rooms, in rehab centers, all of that stuff, right? That'll be one to watch, and be careful of how overly excited we might get about it early on. Aviation's another one, lots of opportunities. We already see iPads in the cockpit of airplanes, but again, they're just there for that single purpose. But will there be an opportunity for these platforms to provide a connected ecosystem within aviation? Huge opportunity for this space. And one I want to talk a little bit more about, just to share, just because I happen to work for John Deere, is the agricultural ecosystem, right? And this is an interesting one. It's not one that a lot of us in the room, or a lot of you in the room probably think about a lot, but it's one that's actually a very complex ecosystem with lots of opportunities, right? Some ways kind of like healthcare, but of course without all the heavy regulation. So I mean, some of the stuff you see up here, up in your upper left, there's a picture of an iPad actually inside the cab of a vehicle, of a tractor. And it's being used as a display that provides higher resolution for the farmer to be able to make decisions. It's being used as a point by which to transmit data to a cloud. Okay? We see, if you do a search for agricultural apps, you'll get thousands of hits. Lots of opportunities to be able to predict weather and show the farmer where his equipment is, what the weather will be tomorrow, what the weather was yesterday, applications to configure and set up your equipment, all kinds of opportunity there. And you know, again, I'm just using this as an example, and I'm going to move in a second into how you define your mobile strategy to be able to have this discussion about the ecosystem. But just to dive a little bit more into this agricultural ecosystem, similar to others, right? There are a lot of places and times in which the individuals in it have to make important decisions, right? And in agriculture is basically this yearly cycle where someone has to make decisions throughout the year about what to do and when to do it, and make all kinds of trade-offs that are real time, right? So the opportunities for mobility are basically all woven in there, that you're making decisions not just in static moments and places, but all over the place. So, you know, mobile really is kind of all over this space already, but much like the other ecosystems, I think the the next battle within this one is who is going to be able to leverage mobile to deliver that connected experience across the whole year, right? And it'll be the same for aviation and healthcare and all of that, okay? So, step back then and think about, all right, so he's told us about, you know, all these ecosystems, and so the big thing everyone's talking about is we need to have a mobile strategy, right? So I want to share a little bit of what I think are kind of the key tenets of a mobile strategy. And of course, I'm coming at it from the standpoint of a Fortune 100 company, but I think it actually applies even if you're a startup, or even if you're just an individual who wants to develop individual application solutions, okay? So these are all important things. So the first conversation I like to have is, what is our commitment to mobile, right? And so I like to use the spectrum just to have that conversation, right? So if you think about it, at the one end of the spectrum, you have mobile only, right? So this is, you just want to exist as a mobile only solution, and you have really nothing else. Angry Birds has become bigger than that, I guess. They're movies and puppets and all kinds of stuff, but they're still a mobile only platform and solution. Everybody talks about mobile first. You know, I just saw an article from the Boston Consulting Group saying that if you look at the difference between you know, what company executives are saying, that commitment is they're all mobile first, and what they're actually doing, there's a huge gap, right? So everyone's kind of jumped on this bandwagon of like, we're mobile first, right? But I think they just like to think mobile first because everybody wants to be, they like the word first, right? What it means to be mobile first is actually, has a lot of implications, and it might not be that your company needs to have a mobile first strategy. That actually may be counterproductive, right? So what it means to be mobile first is when you think about your customer touch points, mobile is the first discussion that you have, right? When you think about your internal resources for development and innovation, the first topic is how do we push it on mobile, right? Facebook is a great use case for this. In early 2012, there were only 9 mobile software developers / architects at Facebook, right? And they sat in the back of the room and they made all the decisions, you know, all the Facebook staff made all the decisions about what features they were going to come out with and what they were going to do next. And then they told the mobile people in the back, all right, just make it happen on mobile, right? And so they switched that model. They decided, boy, you know, that seems to be backwards. And over the last few years, they've actually flipped that around. And they said, we are really truly mobile first. So when Facebook releases a new feature, when they think about a new capability, the conversation first is, how is it going to go on mobile? And then eventually we'll get to the web version of it. Right? So the other point with mobile first is that for a lot of the bigger companies, it's hard for us to be mobile first because we already have so much other stuff that we would have to sort of pass to actually be mobile first, right? But for startups in any industry, mobile first represents a very low barrier to entry, right? You can basically have any idea, any product, and say, hey, you know, I'll just put it on the platform that everybody loves already, right? And that's my touch point to deliver a solution, right? So in agriculture, we're actually seeing a lot of that. Most of the startups in agriculture, even where they're delivering services or hardware, they are actually working under a mobile first type of model, right? I used to call the next one mobile second, right? But nobody liked it because nobody wants to be second, right? So I switched it to mobile augment. And you know, this is where a lot of the bigger players probably belong. If you think about banks, brick and mortar banks, their strategy around mobile is mobile augment, right? They basically try to provide similar capabilities than you have in the actual buildings and on the web through mobile, right? So again, it's not like you're losing the battle because you're mobile augment. This is actually really hard to pull off, right? And it requires a lot of work and a ton of commitment. But you just have to understand that first you're going to look at your entire ecosystem of solutions and you're going to say, okay, how do we basically augment every single one of those moments with mobile, or most of those moments with mobile, right? So that's probably a sweet spot for a lot of the larger players. And then you've got, sort of your mobile niche and mobile random. I would say a lot of the automotive industries are still in this kind of mobile niche, mobile random. You go to buy a Honda and half the cars have a mobile app, and within that half, sometimes the app is just to tell you more about the car that you just bought, right? And sometimes the app actually does something, right? But they're all still kind of trying to figure it out. Right? Last point here in this discussion is that this is a discussion to have about, all right, where are we now, and how do we move, from one side to the other, right? And so it's not just turning on a switch to say we're mobile first, right? It's okay to actually sort of unevenly distribute your strategy and say, all right, in some space over here, we're going to do mobile random. Let's just try some things out. And then eventually we want to get to mobile first, and so let's find another niche where we are committed to doing that, right? So it's not just a static effort that you have to engage in, okay? The other thing here then, as you kind of define the space, is you basically, this is the thing with mobile, right? Especially in a large company, everyone has a great idea for mobile, right? And so, you've already said, all right, we're going to be mobile augment, right? And you want to sort of encourage an entire company to be coming to the table with ideas, right? I mean, that's one of the things about mobile too, that it's really the first technology that's enabled everyone to have an idea about how do we best do business, or how do we best serve customers, right? So, as part of executing a mobile strategy, you need to have an answer for the happy hippie, right? And the answer is the skeptical cat, right? And the skeptical cat actually represents not just one person, but hopefully a function within your organization that challenges at every point when everyone's coming up with these ideas, says, what are we really talking about here, right? Is mobile the right thing? I steal a term from Jay Schwan from Solstice Mobile. He likes to talk about mobile moments, right? And what a mobile moment is basically is, you start out with that question of saying like, all right, is this app idea going to actually replace something that exists? Does using mobile actually make the experience better, easier, faster, something? Or if it's not going to replace something that exists, is your app idea actually going to leverage the capabilities of a mobile device? Or are you simply saying we're going to do an app to do something that a security camera could do, right? So that's really, you need to have that skeptical cat mechanism to be able to have those conversations within your company and kind of filter through some of that. Okay? So spectrum, you want to be mobile first, mobile second, mobile augment. You need your skeptical cat, right? And then the next thing you need is basically you need to be able to have a conversation constantly about how individual apps fit into your ecosystem, right? Now, this is a really challenging discussion because apps in themselves are single-purpose software solutions, right? And we sometimes get confused in what an app should do and what a website should do, right? A website should have a ton of information. It's basically an archive of information to help you find it. An app is a single-purpose solution, right? So you have to be willing to have the discussions about how to accept many single-purpose solutions, right? And not get freaked out right away that we're going to have too many apps, right? In fact, why would that be a bad thing, having too many apps, right? The discussion you need to be having is how do we make sure that it makes sense when an end user is going from app to app, right? How do we not confuse the end user about what they're doing and how they're jumping across? Again, there's an example of the battle for the ecosystem. If you look at the latest iOS, the latest Android platforms, they are beginning to innovate to address the ability to deliver that connected experience and do, jumping from app to app with context, right? So that's basically where it'll go next. The other thing with the mobile strategy, the last thing I'll say is that, we kind of like to sit still and look ahead and say, boy, we'd love to have a mobile strategy, right? And we just look ahead, and we have some ideas about what it looks like, and we have some open questions. The key point here is that if you look at, if you're standing still and just having a conversation about mobile strategy and not doing anything, then the distance from where you stand to actually getting there will just continue to be the same as you move in time, right? So this is what I talked about earlier with business experiments. You have to be willing to take some steps forward along the way as you're defining your mobile strategy to learn and say, what does it actually feel like to travel this road, right? And so as part of a corporate mobile strategy, I think there's two paths. There's a constant revision of the long glide path of what it means to do it right and how do we deliver the connected experience and governance and how many developers do you need and all that stuff. You constantly be having that discussion, right? But don't sit there waiting for that discussion to somehow end and then you can begin work, because it'll never end. It's constantly going to change. And the only way you're actually going to be effective at that glide path is to constantly try those business experiments that actually inform upward to that longer glide path, right? So there are a number of components that you need in a mobile strategy. You'll hear, I think all the topics in today's conference are pertinent and informative. If I could strip it down to three, right? The bare minimum three that really help you kind of get started, right? So the first one is having a user experience framework, right? Now, I'm a UX guy too by education, so I obviously bias toward this space, but you'd be surprised actually if you at least have a visual design framework, how much that helps your skeptical cat, right? Because all of a sudden, you can actually have meaningful conversations within the enterprise to say, hey, look, this is kind of our UX framework. This is what we want to do with our mobile solutions. And this is kind of what they should look like, right? And it's not going to squash any ideas. That actually just gives people some boundaries by which to think about how and what kind of mobile solutions we ought to be delivering, right? And right off the bat, if there's something that can kill the momentum within a large corporation, is for an executive or someone higher up to download 2 or 3 apps and they look different, right? Never mind if they should look different. If they just look different, that's just something that they don't want to hear why they look different. We want consistency for our customers, right? So start with that UX framework. That should be one of your first steps to say, these are the parameters in which we're going to work. And it's a constantly moving target, right? I think my designer actually sits in Boston, and I think I hear her curse the skies every time iOS, decides to completely redo their visual language, because we have to adjust our guidelines. But if you stay on top of that, that's battle number one there. The second thing is just, I kind of joke about the skeptical cat, but the skeptical cat is a key part of your mobile strategy, right? And like I said, it could be a person or several individuals, or it could be an organization, right? But you have to have someone that understands what you're trying to do with mobility, and that understands the space enough, and that understands your company enough to be able to have interesting and productive conversations within the enterprise about what mobile solutions really we should focus on and we should try out, right? So it's that point. The other thing the skeptical cat is someone that people recognize as, I can go to this person and be heard about my idea, right? So that's another component of it. And the last thing, so I don't need to preach to this audience about mobile architects and software architects. What I'll say here is that, we all know the importance of architects. The role of your architects needs to be to continuously revise the long-term glide path for mobility, right? And that strategy. And influence the business experiments, right? Subtle but important difference there. You don't want them to be police officers, right? The moment you turn your architects into police officers, you're essentially wasting their time and their talent to continuously map out that longer strategy for you. In fact, the better police officers are actually the UX people. They're much more effective at it, and the conversations can be a little bit more tangible. And so that's, if you're gonna go with like that constant governance, your UX professionals are gonna be more suited to do it, okay? All right, I'll end my remarks right there, and I think we have a little bit of time for questions too, so thank you. Question in the back. There's one right here. Yeah, there we go.
Hello?
Yep, that works.
So you talked about how you feel that wearables will become a big player in the market. You know, where do you see wearables fitting into that market, or what purpose will they serve, I guess, that mobile device doesn't already serve?
Right. So about 6 months ago, I was the skeptical cat on wearables, right? And actually, I've been skeptical about Google Glass for a while, and I think we're seeing that really struggle right now. But I saw the space of the watches, right? And I haven't worn a watch since the calculator watch. And so I thought, well, what are they doing? You know, nobody wears watches anymore. So I actually went and purchased one of these Pebbles, right? These generic smartwatches. And I thought, let me give this a shot here. You know, it's a little bit like the iPad, where, you know, the first day you're not really quite sure why you bought it and how it fits into the behavior, right? But all of a sudden, just like I talked about mobile moments, you begin to have these wearable moments, right? So the wearable moments are that, you know, you're laying in your couch, you come home and there's just that magical moment where you plop on your couch and your phone just happens to be in your kitchen and it rings, right? And the caller ID shows up on your watch and you say, I don't need to take this one, decline, right? There's a wearable moment, right? And so I started to have all these small wearable moments, and I thought, man, there is something to this wearable thing here that, you know, at a high level you think like, well, it's not even, I still need my phone, so what am I really doing with it? But it turns out that as humans, we really are just so thirsty for efficiency or lazy that anything that can save us just a few seconds of our life in making things easier actually becomes a meaningful thing. Now, so that's the watches, right? And I think I do think that those are going to make a difference. I think the wearable discussion will be heavily tied with the Internet of Things discussion, and I think we're going to go through a period here of 2 to 3 years where there's going to be a lot of silly wearable stuff, right? So there's like a wearable ring and a wearable earring and a wearable belt that self-adjusts, you know. But again, maybe I'll love that one because I fluctuate weight quite rapidly, and I don't want to have to worry about, you know, where my belt's, what notch it's going to go. So I think they're here to stay. I think Google Glass was an example of kind of like the IBM Simon, too much, too fast, right? People aren't ready for the whole thing of going around wearing something in your head, and there was all these iffy things that you have to go through the Google Cloud. But I think the watches will actually serve as that growth catalyst to get us all used to wearables. And then there'll be a whole nother wave in 2 or 3 years that takes us to the next level. Right here.
I don't think I had a microphone. I got a big mouth.
Oh, he does.
You mentioned the importance of the skeptical cat, and I see that, but how do you prevent that person or that entity from becoming becoming sort of the snarling guard dog that never lets any idea come to fruition?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think first of all, you do have to be very careful in choosing your skeptical cat. Actually, our own skeptical cat was supposed to be here today, but he's sick. And so there's actually there's the right type of personality for a skeptical cat. You have to choose someone who leans towards yes, I think, and actually. They're not there to stop ideas, they're there to have conversations, right? So it's just choosing the right individual that has a positive outlook. You know, you don't want to make one of your compliance people the skeptical cat. Right here.
How do you see the role of experimentation fitting in throughout the gamut of enterprises from small to large?
So, let me see if I can. In a large enterprise, experimentation is challenging because it's seen many times as science fair projects, right? So this is why I think that in an intentional mobile strategy of a large enterprise, you have to be very intentional about saying, look, we are going to invest this much in experimentation. The other key thing with experimentation is that it's not just a project that you do in the garage and then you show it to someone and then you can it, right? You might do some of those, but the true sense of experimentation in this space is business experimentation. So you have to be willing to actually experiment and take things to market within that spirit of experimentation, right? That's the difference of, you know, just doing stuff that's so far out that nobody wants to do. I'm not sure I have a good answer for the smaller folks, as I'm not one myself, and I just don't have I am short, but not work in a small place. But you know, I don't have a good answer for that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.